Ethan Carter walked through the crowded market with his hands in his pockets and his eyes moving from stall to stall. The lights above were bright and colorful, glowing in shades of blue, red, and green. People moved all around him, voices mixing with the sound of music and merchants calling out their offers. He had been to the market many times before, but this time felt different. Something was pulling him deeper into the noise and color, like there was something waiting for him. The stalls were lined with glass displays, each one showing young men and women dressed neatly and waiting quietly. They were called servants, sold to whoever could afford them. Ethan had never thought much about it before. He was an engineer, more focused on machines and work than on buying people. But as he walked past each stall, his eyes kept searching until he stopped at one in the far corner. Behind the glass stood a girl. She had long brown hair that caught the glow of the lights and eyes that were filled with both fear and hope. Unlike the others, she was not pretending to smile or look eager. She was simply standing, her hand resting gently against the glass, as if she was waiting for someone who would finally see her. Ethan froze. Something about her expression struck him. She was not begging, but she was not empty either. There was life in her eyes, a quiet strength, and a kind of dignity that seemed out of place in that market. He felt his heart beat faster. The merchant beside the stall noticed Ethan staring, smiled, and stepped closer. "Interested in this one?" the man asked. Ethan did not answer right away. He just kept looking at the girl. She tilted her head slightly, as if trying to read his thoughts. He imagined what her life must have been like, waiting behind glass, watching strangers pass by, hoping someone kind might choose her. Without thinking too long, Ethan said, "Yes." "How much?" The merchant raised his brows, clearly pleased. He gave the price, and Ethan paid without arguing. Papers were signed quickly, and the glass door opened. For the first time, the girl stepped out, her movements careful, her eyes fixed on Ethan. Looked nervous, but also relieved. When she stood in front of him, she lowered her head slightly. "My name is Claire," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "Ethan, you don't need to bow your head. You're safe with me." Saved her eyes, searching his face. There was doubt in her expression, as if she had heard promises before. But something about his voice made her believe him. They walked out of the market together. Claire stayed close, her steps quiet, her hands clasped in front of her. She kept glancing around, unused to the freedom of open streets. Ethan noticed her nervousness and slowed his pace to match hers. As they moved through the busy road, Claire whispered, "I thought no one would ever take me. They all passed by. I waited and waited." Ethan looked at her with a calm expression. "Maybe you were waiting for the right person." She blinked, her lips curving into the smallest smile. It was faint but real, the first sign of joy since he had seen her. When they reached Ethan's small apartment on the edge of the colony, he opened the door and let her in first. Claire paused at the threshold, almost unable to believe she was being treated with respect. Inside, the room was simple but warm. There were shelves filled with tools, a desk with blueprints, and a chair that looked well used. "This is your home now too," Ethan said. "You don't have to be afraid here." Claire's eyes widened. She touched the back of the chair, the edge of the desk, as if testing if it was real. Then she turned to him, her voice trembling. "No one has ever spoken to me like that before." Ethan gave a small shrug. "That's how it should be. You're not a thing to be bought and sold. You're a person." Claire stared at him for a long moment, and tears filled her eyes, but she smiled through them. For the first time in years, she felt hope. Outside the window, the market lights glowed faintly in the distance. But inside that small room, a new story had begun, one that neither Ethan nor Claire could have imagined when the day had started. Claire woke early the next morning. For a moment she forgot where she was and thought she was still behind the glass of the market. Then she heard the quiet sound of tools clicking and saw Ethan sitting at his desk working on a small engine. She sat up slowly, brushing her hair from her face. The smell of warm tea filled the room. Ethan glanced at her and gave a small smile. "Good morning. I made tea. It's not much, but it helps me start the day." Claire hesitated, then stood and moved closer. She sat at the table, wrapping her hands around the warm cup he placed before her. The heat spread through her fingers. she whispered, "Thank you." They sat in silence for a while, the only sound coming from the tools and the faint hum of the engine. Claire sipped her tea and let herself relax. The room felt safe, something she had never known before. After a while, Ethan looked up from his work. "I thought you might want to learn some of this. It keeps me busy." "Maybe it could keep you busy too." Claire's eyes widened. "You would teach me?" "Of course," he said simply. "You should have the chance to learn whatever you want." She nodded quickly, her smile shy but eager. Ethan set the engine aside and cleared a small space on the table. He showed her a handful of simple tools, naming each one slowly so she could remember. She held them carefully, turning them over in her hands, listening to every word he said. Her first attempts were clumsy, but Ethan was patient. He guided her hands gently, showing her how to twist a wire, how to tighten a screw. Claire laughed softly when she made a mistake, and he laughed with her. It was the first time she had laughed without fear in a very long time. Hours passed, and the little machine began to take shape. Claire leaned close, fascinated by how the pieces fit together. She whispered, "It's like magic, but real." Ethan shook his head. "Not magic, just patience and effort. You'd be surprised what you can do if you believe you can." Claire looked at him, her eyes shining. She thought about his words long after they finished working. Later, when the sun was low, they walked outside together. The streets were busy, filled with people moving from shop to shop. Claire stayed close to Ethan, nervous at first, but soon she began to notice the sky. It stretched wide and open above her, painted orange and pink with the sunset. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Yes," Ethan agreed, watching her more than the sky. "You should see it from the hills outside the city. Maybe one day we can go there." She smiled at the thought, her heart lighter than it had ever been. As they passed through the crowd, some people looked at them. Claire felt their eyes and lowered her head. Whispers followed, but Ethan kept walking, his hand gently resting at her back to steady her. When they reached the quieter streets near his home, Claire asked in a soft voice, "Why did you choose me?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment.
How?
Then he said, "Because you looked like you were waiting for someone to see you. Not just look at you, but really see you." And I did. Tears touched her eyes again, but this time they were mixed with joy. She had been invisible for so long, and now someone had noticed her. That night, after they ate a simple meal together, Ethan showed her a small book of designs and sketches. He explained how he dreamed of building machines that could help the colony grow stronger. Claire listened closely, her hand resting on the page. "Maybe I can help you," she said quietly. "Maybe I can learn enough to be useful." Ethan gave her a calm smile. "You already are useful, Claire. You remind me why I do this. But if you want to learn, I'll teach you everything I know." She nodded, her chest swelling with hope. For the first time, she felt like her future could be her own. As she lay down to sleep that night, Claire closed her eyes with a smile. The glass walls of the market no longer held her. She was free, and with Ethan by her side, her life was just beginning. Days turned into weeks, and Claire grew more comfortable in Ethan's home. She learned quickly, her hands steady as she helped with tools and wires. Sometimes she surprised Ethan with clever ideas that solved small problems in his designs. I often told her she had a sharp mind, and each time he said it, she glowed with pride. But not everyone was happy with what they saw. Whispers began in the market about the girl who smiled freely and walked beside her owner like an equal. Merchants frowned when they heard that Claire was being taught to read designs and handle tools. They called it foolish, dangerous even. One evening, Ethan stepped into a shop for supplies, and two men stopped him.
Oh.
They were broad-shouldered traders with cold eyes. One leaned close and said, "You are making a mistake. A servant is not meant to walk beside you. Keep her in line, or others will think the same." Ethan met his gaze without fear. "She is not just a servant. She is a person." The men laughed, but there was no humor in it. Careful with those words. People talk. The wrong ears might hear, and trouble will follow. Ethan ignored them and carried his supplies home. Claire noticed the tension in his shoulders when he returned. She asked softly, "Is something wrong?" He shook his head. "Nothing you need to worry about. Some men don't understand." She lowered her eyes, guilt flickering across her face. "Because of me?" "No," he said firmly. "Because of them." still Claire felt uneasy. The next day, as they worked side by side, she kept glancing at the door, worried someone might come. Ethan noticed her fear and reached for her hand. "You are safe here. Don't let their voices steal your smile." Her heart lifted at his words, and she nodded. Later that week, a captain of the guard came to Ethan's home. He was tall, wearing a dark coat and carrying himself with authority. He looked at Claire, then back at Ethan. "People are talking. They say you are breaking tradition. You should be careful. The Queen herself may hear of this." Claire's breath caught at the mention of the Queen. Ethan stood firm. "Oh, I have done nothing wrong. I treat her with respect. If that causes trouble, so be it." The captain studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "You are brave or foolish. But remember, the Queen listens to the voices of the powerful, and they do not like change." He left with no more words. After he was gone, Claire sat quietly, her hands trembling. "Maybe it would be easier if I went back," she whispered. Ethan's voice was steady but filled with fire. "Never say that. I will not let you go back. You deserve more than a cage. You deserve your life." Tears filled her eyes. She had never known anyone who would fight for her like this. She leaned closer, whispering, "Thank you. I will be strong too." The next day, when they walked through the market, something strange happened. A young girl trapped behind glass looked at Claire and smiled. Another boy raised his hand in quiet greeting. They had heard the stories. They saw the joy on Claire's face, and hope flickered in their eyes. Claire squeezed Ethan's hand as they walked. "They are watching," she said softly. "They see me free. Maybe they believe it can happen to them too." Ethan nodded. "We must keep walking, Claire. Not just for us, but for them." That night, Claire lay awake, thinking about the faces in the glass. She remembered how she used to wait, how she feared no one would come. Now, for the first time, she wanted to stand tall, not just for herself, but for others. Change was coming, and she felt it. She did not know if it would bring danger or hope, but she knew one thing clearly. She was no longer just a servant bought at a market. She was Claire, and her story had only begun. The days grew heavier with whispers and stares. When Ethan and Claire walked through the streets, people stopped to watch them. Some frowned, others nodded with quiet respect. Claire held her head a little higher now, but deep inside she felt the weight of all those eyes. One afternoon, loud knocks came at Ethan's door. When he opened it, two men in fine coats stood outside. They carried scrolls, sealed with the Queen's crest. One of them spoke firmly. "By order of the Queen, you are summoned to answer questions. There are claims that you have broken the rules of this colony." Ethan's jaw tightened. "What claims?" The man looked past him at Claire, who stood silently near the table. "That you treat your servant as an equal? That you allow her freedom. This has caused unrest in the market." Claire stepped forward before Ethan could speak. Her voice shook at first, but she steadied it. "He has done nothing wrong. He gave me kindness and respect. Is that a crime?" The man's eyes narrowed. "Your words will be heard. Come with us tomorrow to the hall. Both of you." When they left, Claire turned to Ethan, fear in her eyes. "They want to take this away from us." Ethan placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "Then we will not let them. We will tell the truth. If they listen, maybe change will come." The next day, the hall was filled with traders, guards, and townsfolk. Whispers echoed against the stone walls as Ethan and Claire stepped inside. The emissaries sat at a long table, their faces stern. "Ethan Carter," one of them began, "you are accused of disturbing order by treating your servant as more than property. Do you deny this?" Ethan's voice was steady. "I do not deny it. I only deny that it is wrong. Claire is a person. She deserves her own life." A wave of murmurs ran through the crowd. Some shook their heads, others whispered in agreement. Then Claire stepped forward, her hands trembling but her chin lifted. "I was once behind glass. Now, I thought my life would end there, but Ethan saw me. He gave me freedom, not chains. I am not less because I was bought. I am alive, and I am free in my heart." The hall grew quiet. Her words echoed like a bell. A merchant stood red with anger. "This is dangerous talk. If one servant believes she is equal, all of them will rise. Order will collapse." Claire turned to him, her voice stronger now. Order built on cages is not order, it is fear, and fear cannot last forever. Her courage lit something in the crowd. Servants who had come with their owners looked at her with wide eyes. One boy whispered, "She speaks for us." The emissaries exchanged glances. One leaned forward. "Your words are bold, but the queen must decide what to do with you. Till then, you will remain under watch." Ethan reached for Claire's hand as guards stepped closer. "Whatever happens, we stand together," he said softly. She nodded, gripping his hand tightly. Together, in the days that followed, the colony buzzed with tension. Claire's speech spread from mouth to mouth, from stall to stall. Servants whispered her name in secret, holding on to hope.
Oh.
Some masters grew harsh, afraid of losing control. But the spark had already been lit. At night, Claire looked out the window at the market lights. She could almost see the faces of those still trapped behind glass. She whispered, "Hold on, a change is coming." Ethan heard her words and placed a blanket over her shoulders. "You gave them hope, Claire. No matter what the queen decides, the people have already heard you." The knock on the door came again before dawn. This time, the message was clear. The queen herself was coming to hear them. Claire felt her heart race, but she stood tall. "Then we will speak again. It's not just for us, but for everyone." Ethan looked at her with quiet pride. Yes, for everyone. The market that once sold silence was now filled with voices. And the girl who once waited behind glass was ready to face the queen herself. The morning was silent when the queen arrived. Her carriage rolled through the streets, guarded by soldiers in bright armor. People gathered on both sides, whispering and pointing. Some bowed their heads, others lifted their eyes with hope. Claire stood with Ethan at the steps of the hall, her heart beating fast. She had never seen the queen before. When the doors opened, the queen entered slowly. She was tall, dressed in silver robes that caught the light, her face calm and unreadable. Her eyes moved over the crowd, then stopped on Claire. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the queen took her seat at the front of the hall. An emissary stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we bring before you Ethan Carter and Claire. He is accused of breaking order by treating his servant as equal. She has spoken words that stir unrest. The colony demands judgment." The queen's voice was steady. "Then let us hear from them." Ethan stepped forward first. His voice was calm, though every eye was on him. "I did not break order. I only gave her the respect that every person deserves. If that is wrong, then the fault is mine." The queen nodded slightly. "And the girl?" Claire walked forward, her hands shaking at her sides. She took a deep breath, then lifted her head. "I was once behind glass, waiting to be chosen. I thought I was nothing. But Ethan saw me as more than a servant. He gave me a chance to live, to learn, to smile again. If you call that unrest, then let the truth be unrest. Because others deserve it too." The hall was quiet. Every word carried through the air. Some traders muttered angrily, but many in the crowd looked at Claire with admiration. A servant girl in the back whispered, "She speaks for all of us." Another voice followed, then another. Soon the hall filled with murmurs of hope. The queen raised her hand, and silence fell again. She looked at Claire with thoughtful eyes. "You are brave to speak so plainly. You wish for freedom, Claire?" Claire's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady. "Yes, Your Majesty. Not only for me, but for everyone who still waits behind the glass." The queen studied her for a long moment, then she turned to the crowd. "Order built on fear cannot last. I see no crime here. From this day forward, no one shall be sold as less than human. Servants will be citizens, free to choose their own paths." The hall erupted with voices. Some cheered, some shouted in anger, but the queen's decision could not be undone. Claire covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. Ethan placed his arm around her shoulders, steadying her. "You did it," he whispered. She shook her head, smiling through her tears. "We did it," and the queen left. The people spilled into the streets. Some traders argued loudly, but the servants who had been silent for years began to laugh, cry, and embrace one another. The market that once felt like a prison now felt like the beginning of something new. In the days that followed, Claire walked freely through the colony. She no longer kept her eyes on the ground. She spoke to others with confidence, sharing her story, encouraging them to believe in their own worth. Ethan continued his work as an engineer, but now he had Claire by his side, not as a servant, but as a partner. She learned quickly, helping him design machines that made life easier for the people of the colony. Together, they became known as builders of both tools and hope. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, Ethan and Claire climbed to the top to watch the sky. The colors spread wide, painting the world in gold and red. Claire took a deep breath, feeling the wind in her hair. "Do you remember the first time you said we might come here?" she asked softly. Ethan smiled. "Yes, I told you one day we would." She leaned against him, her voice filled with peace. "Back then I was afraid to even dream. Now I am free to dream of everything." He placed his hand over hers. "Your courage changed more than just your life, Claire. It changed all of ours." She closed her eyes and smiled, the memory of the glass fading forever. She had been bought in a market, but now she lived with her own voice, her own choices, and a future full of light. And as the stars began to appear, she knew that her story would be remembered not as one of chains, but as one of freedom and joy.